Welcome to Candid Conversations about access and equitable practices for culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education. I'm Kim Schmidt. Welcome. We look forward to our conversations today. And I'd like to introduce Lindsey Reinert.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Our purpose today is to discuss issues of equity and social justice that greatly impact culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education. Students who are culturally and linguistically diverse are often under-identified in gifted education and often do not receive the instruction that they deserve. In our discussions today, we focus on the need for candid conversations that address issues around identification and the instruction of culturally and linguistically diverse gifted learners. We see this as a social justice issue we must attend to. Join us today as we begin to discuss current issues and describe practices, in particular, culturally responsive pedagogy, to better meet the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education. In this session, you will engage in the following questions. What are the concerns and issues in the field of gifted education in relation to culturally and linguistically diverse learners? And what instructional practices support culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education? In particular, we're going to spend time looking at culturally responsive pedagogy today. We have a short amount of time, so we really want to focus on this particular practice or pedagogy. So one of the things that's really important to consider are our beliefs or our perceptions about the students that we teach. Our beliefs greatly influence how we interact and plan for and instruct and assess our own students. So teachers' perceptions of culturally and linguistically diverse learners greatly impact the identification, assessment, and instructional practice offered to culturally and linguistically diverse learners. For example, culturally and linguistically diverse learners are often not identified for their deep content knowledge in math, science, language arts, because their home language, their language that they speak in their home, differs from that of the assessments that are used to identify them as gifted learners, and also their observations in their classroom instruction. So assessments are conducted in English only, and teachers may be monolingual and not speak the same language as their students, so that they can observe and see that deep content and knowledge and the language strengths of our students in the classroom. So Lindsey and I want to present our belief statements to show that our beliefs and perceptions, not only about culturally and linguistically diverse learners, but also about learning in general, greatly impact the ways in which we serve all our students in equitable ways. So I'm going to read to you my statement that I wrote. I believe that language development and bilingualism should be a clear focus for culturally and linguistically diverse students in gifted education, programming, and instruction. When a student learns multiple languages quickly and deeply, their language expertise and gifts can be accounted for in identification, assessment, programming, and instructional practices through the inclusion of home languages and cultures in assessment and instruction.
Thanks, Kim, for sharing your belief statement. I believe that all students have the right to learn and grow every day. My role is to assist in removing any obstacles or barriers to accessing equitable education and services. No matter the learning setting, remote or face-to-face, or the kinds of accommodations needed, such as the pacing, the scaffolding, the repetition, or lack of repetition. Now that you have heard our belief statements, Kim and I would like to give you a minute to write and reflect on your own beliefs around gifted education and cultural linguistic diversity. You may want to use the sentence stems as scaffolds. Kim will play some music, and when the music stops, we'll come back together.
Thank you for reflecting with us on your beliefs and perceptions. That's very helpful as we enter into thinking about gifted education for culturally and linguistically diverse learners as a social justice issue. We believe that it is, and here's why. The United States Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, indicated that 2% of English learners are enrolled in gifted and talented programs, as compared to 7% of non-English learners represented in school. Historically, there is an underrepresentation of students from culturally, linguistically, and economically as well diverse communities in gifted and talented programs because of the identification procedures and policies that impact our students.
Now we are going to listen to an NPR education report by Steve Inskeep. As we engage in this audio, please keep these two items in mind. Listen to Alejandra's story and think about the issues and concerns that might arise. Secondly, please reflect upon issues and concerns in your own community or school district. You might want to utilize the sentence stem. It's a great strategy for scaffolding language. Feel free to capture your issues and concerns as we listen to Alejandra's story.
Sometimes teachers assume too much about a student who seems like a problem. That's especially true if the student is just learning English. Researchers have been studying kids who arrive in school speaking little or no English. As with any group of kids, some are gifted, but the research suggests gifted kids may be overlooked and miss out on chances for more challenging schoolwork. Here's Claudio Sanchez of our NPR Ed team.
If there was to be a poster child for gifted Latino students, 17-year-old Alejandra Galindo would be a good choice.
What can I tell you about myself? I'm a minority in the gifted world, which is very unfortunate.
I do a double take. Unfortunate?
Well, I guess it's just kind of hard to not see people that look like me in my classes.
Alejandra is a senior at North Canyon High School in Phoenix. And yes, she's lucky to be one of the few Latino students in the gifted program. You see, before she was identified as gifted, Alejandra was identified as an English language learner, or ELL. You know, those kids who are often kept in some far-off corner of the school away from everybody else. That was Alejandra, says her mom.
She will come and cry. She will say, I don't want to go to school. She didn't want it to be Hispanic. She didn't want to speak our language.
Norma Galindo, Alejandra's mom, is originally from El Salvador. Her dad, Arnulfo, from Mexico. They've always known their daughter was bright, beyond her years.
I remember Alejandra coming to me and saying, Mom, I'm bored at school. Classes are so easy and I don't have anything else to do. And I said, well, you're not supposed to be bored at school. You need to be challenged. So I talked to her teacher and I said, can you do something for her?
Parents are usually the first ones to figure out that their child is gifted. But in schools across the country, English language learners are just not on anybody's radar. Many are never tested for giftedness, and most teachers are not trained to identify them. Alejandra, for example, when she was tested in elementary school, the results showed that her verbal reasoning skills were off the charts, not just in English, but Spanish as well.
Now that I'm older, I realize that being bilingual is very important. That in combination with being gifted, it's like so many doors have opened.
Those doors have opened wide. Alejandra has excelled in just about every advanced college-level course that North Canyon High has to offer. Her academic success has motivated Alejandra to fine-tune her other gift. Singing with a school choir. Arizona is one of 32 states that mandate gifted education. Only 4 states, though, fully fund gifted programs. So it's hard to say how much we as a nation are actually spending on gifted kids. Even less clear is whether any states require that English language learners be tested for giftedness. And that, experts say, is a problem.
We're losing a talent of kids from...
Thanks for listening to Alejandra's story. And as we know, here in the state of Colorado and across our nation, this is a concern for all of us in education to make sure we're meeting students' needs and being equitable with programming and services. Take a few minutes now to do some more reflecting and writing around any concerns or issues that maybe arose as you thought about your own community and your own district. Maybe a specific student you're thinking of too. And we'll play some music, and when the music stops, we'll come back together.
Let's make it 1 minute. How's that sound?
Great.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsey, and thank you for taking a moment to reflect. There's one thing that I want to back up and discuss with you. So Steve Inskeep talked about students in schools as English language learners, and students are often labeled as English language learners in school systems, districts, and in policy. For the purposes of our presentation, we look at students as culturally and linguistically diverse learners to celebrate the fact that not only are they English learners, but they're students who have who are bilingual, who have multiple languages and multiple cultures. And we feel like that represents the work that we do better. And so we often use the term culturally and linguistically diverse learners or students, or we use the term bilingual. So those two terms can be used interchangeably. So right now, what I would love for you to do, or love for us to do together, is to reflect upon one practice that really supports the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education. And this particular practice that we're going to highlight today is culturally responsive pedagogy. So this is a pedagogy that's used for all students, but in particular, it can be very helpful for culturally and linguistically diverse students in gifted education. So the first tenet of culturally responsive pedagogy is that academic achievement must be high for all learners. Not just some learners, but all learners. We want them all to achieve at the same high level, and we're going to push them to excel. We're not going to hold differing beliefs for different students. The second tenet is cultural competence. We, as teachers, are responsible for learning about our students' cultures. We're also responsible for learning about different cultures other than our own. And our students may represent a variety of cultures in our classroom, and they can gain cultural competence as they learn about other students' worlds in the classroom. The third tenet is critical consciousness, and this is pivotal to culturally responsive pedagogy, where we're looking at critical issues. We're digging deep into them. And not only are we discussing them, talking about them, opening up a space for students to share varying perspectives about issues in our classroom, we're also going to act on those issues through projects, through letters, through small acts that we can take in our communities to make a difference. And the fourth tenet is problem posing and solving. And that's when we provide a lot of opportunities for our students to ask questions, pose problems, and to solve those problems collaboratively. So in gifted education, we think about culturally responsive in the same way, but there are some specific additions we'd like to highlight. First of all, culturally responsive pedagogy in gifted education is student-centered. We're focused on students' needs, their abilities, their cultures, their languages, and we use that knowledge to frame and shape our standards and our curriculum to meet their needs. The second thing is relationships are key. Not just our relationships with our students, but the students' relationships with one another and our relationships with their families and the community. It's going that extra mile to get to know them, to invite them in, to be a partner with them, to really understand our students. The third part of this is providing a safe, collaborative learning community in our classrooms and our schools. We want our students to be able to feel free to interact and talk and make mistakes and speak whichever language they feel most comfortable speaking without being overcorrected or ridiculed for the ways that they express themselves. And fourth, we have to provide engaging, motivating, and challenging standards-based curriculum. And so standards are important, and we want to make sure that when we're designing our curriculum, that it's also engaging, motivating, and challenging. Fifth, we really want to provide a spot for diverse perspectives to emerge through open-ended problem solving. This might look like a book discussion where we open up a question and we'd say, how do you relate to this character and this incident that happened in the story? We allow students to share their perspectives, or not even allow, but encourage students to share their perspectives and to agree and respectfully disagree with one another. And then number 6 is we provide opportunities for multiple forms of representation and expression. And so I want to show you an example of that. In this project, a teacher focused on video and multimedia storytelling by providing opportunities for his students to create films and documentaries. So Hernandez, this is in Edutopia, if you want to go to this link later, describes how students explored political and cultural inequities by creating international documentaries and broadcast journalism stories. So some specific steps students might take as they're creating a project in their community are to interview people in the community based on a focus area they want to uncover. And based on these interviews of people in the community, they might create multimodal forms of expression. They can create a multi-touch book or a video that they put in a YouTube channel. Super cool, and students not only love this, but it's very engaging for them to use multiple modalities to express what it is that they're learning. Not only can they produce that documentary that explores interviews, but also they can use it to explore issues or problems or concerns in their neighborhood if they want to identify those with the community members. And they can also make documentaries about celebrations and things that are awesome about their neighborhood and community to show the funds of knowledge that are coming from families and community members. And Lindsey is going to explain culturally responsive pedagogy from a gifted lens a little bit more deeply.
So in the handouts that were provided to you, you will access this Ready for Rigor framework for culturally responsive teaching. This document can be found in Rosetta Hammond's book, Cultural Responsive Teaching and the Brain, Promoting Authentic Engagement and Rigor Among Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Students. Let's discuss and dissect these 4 sections of the framework. The first practice area addresses awareness. This ties to affirmation of one's identity. The second practice area looks at learning partnerships. This ties to instructional conversations about our similarities and our differences. The third area of practice addresses community of learners and learning environment. This ties to validation of individuals' needs. The final practice area that we'll be focusing our attention on is in the red circle, informational processing. Cultural responsive educators know how to stimulate, strengthen, and expand students' intellective capacity. This practice connects closely with the foundations of gifted education. Educators who know about how the brain learns and leveraging students' cultural models will lead to engaging students in higher order thinking skills. This ties to wise feedback to learning to navigate the world around us. When educators attend to all 4 areas of this framework, students are ready for rigor and independent learning. Now let's look at a sample lesson around cultural responsive teaching. The second handout you have access to is a robust lesson from Facing History and Ourselves. This organization uses lessons of history and to challenge teachers and their students to stand up to bigotry and hatred. In this lesson, students begin to synthesize their understanding of identity through the creation of a mask. For centuries, various cultures have used masks as a way to express individual and group identity. Masks can provide a way to visually represent an answer to the question, who am I? When thinking about this concept of who am I, it allows us to define ourselves as an individual, and at the same time, it allows for discourse when others may be choosing labels for us. This can sometimes be the case with a gifted designation. Within gifted education, we discuss the concept of student identity with the connection of being identified as a gifted learner. Having students think about who am I in a sense of what's behind the mask, allowing students to start identifying the behaviors and personality traits that they show to the world, and maybe the ones that they hide from the world too. We have many faces or masks that we show depending on the situation that we are in and the roles that we are playing. Knowing our faces or our masks helps us understand our personality, our actions, and our motivations. When we understand these things, we can navigate the world in an easier way. This lesson also leverages two different mentor texts, modeling different perspectives and point of views. This lesson embodies the ready for rigor aspects of affirmation, defining who I am, instructional conversations, dialogue with peers about our behaviors, personality traits, and even the labels that come to us, validation of our identity and our worth, and that wise feedback in how we engage with the world around us. Now let's look at some reflective questions that may assist you in preparing a lesson. Looking at these questions may help you as you're determining if this is a lesson you're ready to move forward with for your gifted learners that may be identified as culturally linguistic diverse. So first, analyzing the lesson for its cultural responsiveness. Secondly, we want to ask ourselves, in what ways can we be more culturally responsive in the needs of the gifted learners we're instructing? Thirdly, how can we be supporting the use of bilingualism and translanguaging in our programming for our learners? And finally, how can we be weaving that cultural responsive pedagogy that Kim has highlighted today into our instruction for gifted learners? As we keep moving forward, I wanted you to be aware that this lesson that I shared is just one of 10 lessons in a broader unit of study on identity and community. Here's just a screenshot of what some of the different lesson topics will address. I highly encourage you to access this curriculum unit to work with your students in your classrooms.
Thank you, Lindsey. So what we're going to do in a little bit is we're going to come together to discuss what we've just touched on in our presentation today. And here are some reflective questions that you can respond to right now before we go into our discussion by writing or drawing what's important to you from our presentation. We'd like for you to think about, how is this lesson culturally responsive? And then you can push back as well. How is this lesson not as culturally responsive as we would like it to be? We want to hear your opinions. And then second, in your role as a teacher or parent, in what ways can you foster cultural responsiveness? So thinking about your school, your classroom, your community, how can we be more culturally responsive to the needs of our culturally and linguistically diverse learners in gifted education? And then let's bring it back to Alejandra in the classroom. And let's think about, how can we support her through culturally responsive pedagogy. So if we're a teacher and we're thinking about Alejandra being in many of our classes, how are we going to support her needs in our classrooms? So here are some ideas that Lindsey and I brainstormed, and that connect back to culturally responsive pedagogy that we discussed earlier. So the first thing we might do is support her musical talents. She loves choir, she loves to sing. How can we incorporate music in our classroom? Perhaps provide an opportunity for her to share some of her favorite songs, and make sure that we're bringing music into our units of study. So as a literacy teacher and English teacher, I would want to bring in music. So if we were studying themes in our classroom, we could also look at the themes of songs, and we can incorporate music as a way to understand some of the literary work that we're doing. Second, we want to integrate her culture and funds of knowledge in the classroom. So that little snippet just told us a little bit about her life, but we want to uncover more about who she is and bring that into our classrooms. Third, we want to create a space to hear her voice and her perspectives as well as others. So we want to provide opportunities for students to have open-ended discussions and debates about important issues in their lives. Fourth, we want to facilitate opportunities for Alejandra to interact and talk with other students in English and in Spanish. So Lindsey touched on briefly this idea of translanguaging. So translanguaging is when we look at bilingualism as not separate languages in our brain, but as multiple languages shared together that are used strategically to convey and communicate important information. So when you're bilingual, oftentimes you're going back and forth between those languages to convey certain ideas. And we want to provide opportunities for students to be able to do that. And then fifth, problem posing, providing an opportunity for Alejandra to invite discussions, raise questions, and solve issues or problems that are important to her about her community and her life. And she can work collaboratively with others to do that.
So Kim and I would like to highlight a couple of upcoming professional learning opportunities that we will be providing. The first one is the University of Denver will be offering a CLD-GT professional learning online course that has been approved by CDE. As we know, educators must demonstrate completion of training or professional development activities equivalent to 45 clock hours in culturally and linguistically diverse education for license renewal. If you enjoyed a taste of our session and our learning this evening, we will be presenting a full session at CAGT on Tuesday, October 20th. And our title is Building Bridges, Best Practices for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners in Gifted Education. So we'd love to have you join us then. And finally, we're very excited to share with you that the University of Denver is also offering a CLD GT course that will be meeting the three semester hours, again, in culturally and linguistically diverse education that would meet the needs for license renewal. And that will be coming out in the summer of 2021. So with that,
yeah,
Kim and I would like to say
also that course also meets the needs of the CLDE endorsement that we offer in our program as well. So you can get a CLDE endorsement, and that's a part of our endorsement program.
So lots of learning opportunities available to you, and simply by just reaching out to the University of Denver Morgridge College of Education, and we can get you set up with what you need. So Kim and I would like to thank you for spending your evening with us. We look forward to the second part of this session, the question and answer, and thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. I'll see you soon. And Lindsey, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to record this presentation early, because Lindsey is very busy as a gifted coordinator and gifted in Jefferson County and had a prior engagement. So thank you so much, Lindsey, and thank you all. We look forward to discussing these ideas with you further. Have a great evening.
Okay. So I'm going to pause the screen there so that everybody has access to your email and information for a little bit while we have a time for questions and answers. So I did post an opportunity for people to jump in the chat and pose their questions at this point. But I appreciate everything you had to share tonight, ladies. I appreciate the time and effort you put into that as well. I know that our schedules are so busy, and the fact that we're all here right now in a Zoom, it's pretty awesome. So thank you. And welcome to the live portion of Facebook Live.
We're excited that we're all here together finally. So thanks for having us, CAGT.
Okay, so I don't have any questions yet, so we're gonna wait a little bit on that. But is there anything, actually, can I ask a question? I have a question. Can you guys hear me okay?
Of course,
okay.
Go right ahead, Randy.
All right, so maybe this might help get the kind of the conversation rolling. So as I was listening, and I went through the culturally linguistically diverse education courses at Regis to fulfill the requirements for relicensure in Colorado. So I appreciate you sharing these opportunities here for that, especially your courses that you're offering and the professional learning you're offering, because that's a huge undertaking for some of our teachers to get those credits. So it's awesome that our local districts are offering that, and I'm so happy that the state is requiring that, because I think it's so important in our state with the percentages of students that we have that are not even just linguistically diverse, but culturally diverse in our communities. I've worked with Norma for a couple years now, years past, on increasing access and identification for culturally linguistically diverse learners in my district specifically, but as well as we had 4 other districts or BOCES throughout the state that worked on this. And despite doing that for 3 years, and we've made great gains, but despite doing that for several years, I'm still struggling with finding good quality assessments to help us identify gifted students who are also maybe English language learners or from diverse backgrounds. What suggestions might you have for districts who might be struggling with equitable identification practices?
Well, I'll start off, Randy, really quick, that we're really excited to have partnered with CDE and a committee that worked on looking at our access assessments that are used across the state for identification of ESL learners and where their progression is with their language acquisition and development. And CDE with the Cultural Linguistic Diversity Department and the Gifted Department work together to come out with some new guidelines to help support districts across the state with using the access assessment data as a piece of qualifying evidence for that body of evidence towards gifted identification. So that's a really exciting new movement, and I know those pieces are have been coming out to directors and coordinators and BOCES in just the last several weeks as we worked on those committees these last couple of summers to have that work be released out to the field. So that's one exciting new thing that we'll be able to leverage as a tool for that body of evidence for identification.
Excellent. I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because it's definitely something I know that we've been working on. I've been part of that cohort as well, working with Nisha Lawler down in Durango.
Yes.
On that. So I'm glad you mentioned that those guidelines we're working on formalizing those and getting them available to everybody. And so why not be able to use that piece of assessment, right? I feel like sometimes we just assess. Why not be able to utilize what we have in front of us?
Exactly. And I think a big component of that is looking at our bilingual kiddos and how quickly they move from one level of their language acquisition to the next level. If they're moving from a NEP to a FEP to a LEP, or how quickly they may be transitioning out of an English language designation in the sense of side support services within a district. And so that is great data that we can be leveraging to look at gifted identification. So that's a really exciting new piece to the puzzle in Colorado.
Awesome. Kim or Norma, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say thank you again, Randy, for allowing us to be here this evening. It's indeed a pleasure. And I would encourage us all to think about broadly looking at body of evidence. I think sometimes what happens is we may rely on tests that are focused on one piece of information. And if we think more broadly about body of evidence, I think that will help us as we try to identify talent in young people as well.
Thank you, Norma. I'd love to echo that as well. When I presented last February at EDGE, one of the things that came up is teachers were discussing all of the different assessments that compare and contrast across districts, and it varies greatly. But one overwhelming trend was the use of standardized assessments as a primary indicator of a student's giftedness. And sometimes there would be one or two standardized assessments so that there was more of a body of evidence, but it still was a standardized assessment that was given in English, which those assessments have significant bias, cultural bias in them. And so, Norma, I think the more we can expand the assessments and that intake process, the more we'll be able to look at our students in new ways. And so having observation protocols to help us identify students would be super helpful. And then also using the access in the WIDA as well would be really important. And then, Lindsey, the other thing that you've been doing are having, looking at talent pools, right? And so that's another way of looking at identification. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So talent pool is a great avenue that we can have a lot of flexibility when we're looking at leveraging kiddos' potentiality. And so within talent pool, it's not having a specific cut score. It may not even be scores that you're looking at. It might be performance pieces that you're looking at with students of how they're thinking critically or the kinds of questioning that they're doing. So I think talent pool is a great way that we can cast that wider net and definitely be more inclusive than exclusive as we move forward. Because bottom line, it's about programming, right? Yes, there's this whole piece of identification and then they get a formal advanced learning plan, but really all of that brings us to programming. And so if we can be programming towards that potentiality, regardless if a student is identified or not, with whatever label, then we're meeting kiddos' needs and supporting their learning and helping them flourish and grow. So I think talent pool is a great way, and there's lots of different focuses. It could be focused around a specific content area, or it could be all cross-content and multidisciplinary, and there's that flexibility. You could have a cut score, say the top 10%, top 15, or you could have no cut score, and you're really just looking at that demonstration of where kids are at and how you can foster that learning.
I just want to share one more thing really quickly. I was working with a group of practitioners, I think it was actually this summer, and we were examining the language around our identification process. And some of these folks have been working in the field for quite a while. And as we read the language carefully, there was this almost aha moment that there's the language or in the identification processes. It's not and. You don't have to have this and this and this. It's or. And it was almost a revelation that it could be this or this, not an and. And I think that was a really important piece that sometimes I think we forget about as well.
I think we definitely, in the way we interpreted the guidelines, and I think I was in the room when that happened, Norma, and I think the way we interpret the guidelines was definitely like, we were requiring students to jump through this assessment and then this assessment and then this assessment. And when we were like, or means they just need this piece, and we can say, let's serve them. And I think going back to also what Lindsey said, I think another conversation that was had in that cohort was are we identifying to enrich, or are we enriching with the hopes that maybe we will identify? Not necessarily as a means to an end, but to pull kids in and say, oh my gosh, this child has an incredible aptitude for science or robotics or something like that. And we never would have known that because we wouldn't have allowed them to self-select, because we're basing it on, oh, you have to be identified already to receive the services, but provide the services and then hope maybe that leads to identification. So making identification a gatekeeper for programming is maybe not the best practice, but creating programming that allows students to shine in ways we may not have otherwise seen, and then using that information to identify and serve them with an ALP or whatever it is. But I think really switching it around and saying, oh, let's open the doors to more kids in the hopes that maybe we will find those individuals that are hiding, or maybe don't have the language yet to express it in traditional English language school settings, but that have incredible abilities. So I do have actually another statement. I got a screenshot sent to me because for some reason, I don't have access to the form, but there were it was more comments than anything, but I think that they would merit some discussion here in this group. She comments, our children are Latino and bilingual in Spanish, and after working very hard to highlight how my children should be identified, we found that GT opportunities were very limited for CLD students, and the curriculum was centered around whiteness, and teachers and administrators weren't always prepared to be culturally relevant and counter aggressions and those microaggressions that are prevalent in the classroom and schools. It's wonderful that we're re-examining our systems and practices, but the author here believes that there are some deep beliefs that need examined. I think that's very true. And CLD children should not bear the emotional, social, and cognitive burden for the whole system. And they did say, thank you for working on this, and they applaud you for putting so much, but more, and saying so much more work must be done to include more people who have been excluded for so long. So I don't know if you have any comments on that statement, but I thought it was a great statement from a parent of CLD GT kiddos.
Yeah, I love that she's really talking about how beliefs really impact the ways in which we teach and our practices as teachers in our classroom. And so she's really speaking to the beliefs that are pervasive throughout schools. So how do we change the beliefs about culturally and linguistically diverse learners and look at language and bilingualism as such an asset? Mm-hmm. And, you know, we think about math and science and engineering as gifted areas, but language as well. And being bilingual and being facile in multiple languages and really knowing multiple cultures well is such a strength. And so I think it's expanding how we look at giftedness, but it's also expanding how we look at all children and really breaking down those barriers and that have systemically kept students out for so long.
Absolutely.
I support with where Kim's coming from, and I think it goes back to some of the just examples that how Kim and I like to present. We like to model what you can then take back and do in your classroom or with your own staff or students. And so that whole idea of starting those conversations around what are your beliefs, and then really starting to define it more from just your belief around gifted, but your belief around learners as a whole, your belief around cultural, linguistic, diverse kiddos, and seeing that as an asset. I think another piece of work that we've been doing with collaboration with CDE is there a way we could be leveraging foreign language assessment data as another tool for identification when kiddos are bilingual in a native language and can show that in a demonstration of an assessment. Again, not just one assessment, but a piece of evidence that could help us move forward with identification and truly honor that asset of being bilingual. So I think that's another component that needs to come. Clearly, as a nation and globally, there's a lot of social injustices happening that need to be addressed society-wise, but also how are we addressing that in our public education systems? And that's where Kim and I believe that cultural responsive pedagogy has to be woven into everyday lessons across curriculum for learners so that teachers are able to be vulnerable and put themselves out there so students can be vulnerable and be their honest selves in their learning situations.
I would just build on that as well. We have a colleague at the University of Denver who wrote a book titled Funds of Knowledge. And the focus is really on recognizing the wealth of knowledge that comes from diversity in perspective, diversity in cultural and linguistic experiences, recognizing the funds of knowledge that could be shared for all of us, rather than being focused on compliance or on a single outcome. And so I think there's a definite need and desire to strengthen that point of view. And again, we thank CAGT for hosting these events.
Absolutely. One last thing is, I think we have to move beyond assessing students in English only and look at reading, writing, speaking, and listening either in their home language, or look at content knowledge in new ways through classroom observations, through nonverbal ways that students show their learning. And so if the English language is a gatekeeper, then we're doing those students a disservice. So we need to look at our assessments and see how they're honoring language for students.
My friend Deb Nielsen did comment that she'd like to find more assessments in other languages. You know, like you could administer the COGAT in Spanish. You know, you can do the nonverbal CAEGT or the unit, which is a nonverbal assessment. But I think you're right. I think also those observations, that qualitative information that we can gain from just talking to a student or observing them, watching them, talking to their community. I think we need to tap into our communities. What are our students doing in their churches? What are our students doing in their families that we don't acknowledge in a school setting, but that are valuable skills and talents and gifts that we're not factoring into our decision making. And so I think you make a great point, like definitely not just assessments in another language, but also other means of identifying those gifts. So yeah, and assessments in other languages. And I think also one thing that's always been kind of a thorn in my side is a nationally normed rating scale that is like geared towards culturally responsive pedagogy. And I feel like a lot of our rating scales are, again, like Nora mentioned, about compliance and geared towards whiteness and compliant behavior and very white-centered values. And I think we've got to, maybe we just need to go back. I need to go back and get my doctorate and partner up with some of you, and we need to go and tackle that and nationally norm a rating scale that is more culturally reflective.
We're happy to talk to you about that, Randy.
For sure.
We need a team, a big team.
Right, absolutely.
There is a huge need for it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think there has been some different work too when we think of gifted manifestations and gifted characteristics. A lot of the beginning writings were definitely focused at that white privilege perspective. And as we continue to have new literature published around manifestations from different cultures, from different backgrounds, that help us see that those characteristics that are maybe a traditional checklist that had worked in the past does not really reflect a specific culture. And so we really need to look at those diverse groups and what is manifesting as gifted characteristics specifically for that diverse group.
Absolutely. We need to get right on that, girls. Okay, so we just have a couple comments. Tapping into community is brilliant. There are many that could be identified through other community organizations and churches. Deb Nielsen said, and that was from JS Washington. Deb Nielsen says there's a need for support so teachers can facilitate deeper discussions among students with different perspectives. And as you were talking, I wrote down social justice and critical conversations, and allowing those to happen, those kind of conversations and actions and activities and stuff to happen in schools opens the doors to those critical conversations about the needs and diversity within our communities, that our schools have a place in discussing those, and our schools have a place in addressing those and attending to those, I think. And I think for fear of whatever, our schools tend to separate ourselves from that, but I think we're just harming our diverse students by keeping ourselves away out of those discussions instead of opening and saying, yeah, let's have this dialogue and let's teach students how to have this dialogue in a respectful way.
You know, there's a wonderful colleague named Ken Dixon who does tremendous work in critical conversations, and perhaps we can think about involving him in one of these presentations at some point as well. It's his strength area, and he's been working in the gifted African American community for years, and he would be fabulous.
I've got his name written down. Ken Dixon, you said?
Yep. Right. I'll get you the contact.
Yeah, and I like using book clubs as a place to spur a lot of critical conversations, because if you're looking at the literary canon, or if you're looking at books by lots of authors of color or who speak different languages, in order to really go deep into those pieces of literature and really talk about it in lieu of our lives today, we have to have those discussions. We have to be able to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird and how it differs from that time period to now. And so, and kids are thinking about it anyway. So it's so easy to do. It's just we need to take that step to do that.
And I think I concur with Kim that we have to live in the itchy and scratchiness of it and be okay with that, and to be okay that we may not have the right answer, because there may not be a right answer, that we're all in our identity and individual struggle with finding where our place fits in our diversity as a community together. So I think that's a big piece of those critical conversations, is you're going to feel itchy and scratchy, and that's just part of the moving forward.
Yeah, that like being comfortable with being a little uncomfortable, and that's how we grow and that's how we change. So I appreciate everything you've shared tonight. We are like filling our time. It is almost 6 o'clock, and we are out of questions, but gosh, I've actually really enjoyed this discussion today, and I think that I can't wait to share it with the staff in my district. I promised them that I would make sure, I told them to tune in, but I know it's like dinner hour. But I promised to share this with them because I think it's such an important conversation, especially in our diverse districts. Well, everywhere, but especially in our diverse districts. So thank you again, ladies, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. I do want to really quickly, ladies, if you'll hang on just a moment until we close, but I do want to quickly remind everybody, if you did register for the CAGT conference, and these ladies will be here presenting on that, to be on the virtual conference on that Tuesday presenting, you should have received an email that was telling you you're going to get a sneak peek at the app coming in like a day or two, and you'll be able to play around on the app. Look at your keynote sessions, look at the breakout sessions, schedule your time on there, get comfortable using the app prior to the conference. So look for that follow-up email to come so you can access that, and feel free to email if you have any questions, or message us here on Facebook if you have any questions about the app or how to access the conference. We'd be happy to help. So ladies, thank you again. We appreciate your time. And folks, thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to sign off, and we will see you next Tuesday, same time, same place.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for organizing.